how big things come from little things, let's provide you with a very simple framework about how relationships really work, which will help us understand this progression a little bit better. Number one, I need you to understand that as humans, we all have a variety of thoughts and feelings that we experience every day, like on the daily, day in, day out. I can't even get away from it when I sleep. And guess what? They're going to be different than those of your partner. And sometimes that's a difficult thing to wrap our head around because we feel like if I'm with my person, they totally get me and we're in sync and they can finish our sentences and we're playing matchy-matchy. We've got to be on the same page. We got to feel the same way. We got to think the same way, or we have a big problem. And I need you to understand that sounds really romantic, but it's just not the reality. Like we all have, as human beings, very different feelings, emotions, thoughts, perspectives, because we all come from very different experiences and we all have very different emotional drivers inside of ourselves. Number two, when I have emotional safety to share with you, which is typically present in the beginning of a relationship. Heck, it's even present when I'm risking meeting a stranger for the first time. Like I don't really have an aversion to sharing. I just don't know how deeply I can share or how much to share of myself. But initially, I don't necessarily feel like, oh, there's no way I'm going to say that and there's no way I'm going to say that. We are pretty open and willing to explore what might be possible in the beginning. It's only when things, wear on in time that I start to make it up in my head that I can't talk about this because the last time I did blew up. We had a fight. That was the point that I criticized you, said some things I didn't mean. And then that was the point you criticized me and maybe said some things you didn't mean, or maybe you did. And little by little, we start to create this narrative inside of our own minds of what's okay to talk about and what isn't, based on the emotional safety that I am experiencing with you. And literally what I'm wanting, like what feels safe for me, is that I feel valued, I feel cherished, and this creates connection between us. It's the kind then that we can co-create life with. So this safety idea is very important because without it, I won't share. And with it, I just feel like you get me. I feel valued. I feel cherished. I feel important to you. And that's how most relationships start. And we develop enough connection between the two of us that we decide we're going to leap and take a big risk and co-create a life together, move in, share finances, day-to-day chores, share our kids, make kids, do all kinds of things together. And we won't do it unless it typically feels safe on the front side. And then we move to the next one, which is through time, that safety begins to get sacrificed from a variety of small things that then turn into big things. And this is when the connection that we built our life on begins to atrophy, because I'm going to withhold, pull back, not share, cope in all kinds of ways in order to hang in there. And hopefully through time, this will turn around and get better. And all that's holding us together eventually is the money and the kids, because the emotional connection that we once had in the beginning is now atrophied to such a point in time that there's nothing holding us together emotionally. And so we find that couples say, I really want to feel emotionally connected to my person. And we have an intuitive knowledge that it's going to take communication. When these things seem so intuitive and so obvious, why the hell is it so hard? The reality is small issues in our relationships can be easily overlooked. It's important to identify them and to learn how to address these issues early on to prevent them turning into big deals, sacrifice everything that we are so desperately doing everything we can to build, to create, to sustain for the long haul. I don't know of any two people that decide they want to co-create together and merge their lives, whether that's just through moving in together or getting married, that don't really want the best and that really don't want it to last the long haul. Like we really are doing our very best. And these little problems now, big problems later, are at the heart of the matter. So if we can understand the little stuff, that's really going to give us a leg up into understanding how they turn into big stuff.
I think this mirrors many other places in life where we discount. I always say my success in life, as I look back, it's been the small consistencies over time that has led me to success. A lot of times we're swinging for the home run. And if you take a sports analogy, usually the best baseball players, if you will, are the difference between being someone that doesn't play often and someone that plays all the time and is an all-star is one additional hit every 10 at-bats, meaning you get a hit 3 out of 10 versus 2 out of 10. It's just that 8 degrees of separation that we hear that really is a huge difference maker.
Agree. And so if we can keep an eye on the small things, it usually prevents the big things from happening, except for the majority of us don't have this conversation, so we don't know the small things to keep track of. So let's give you a few of the most popular that we bump into. And the first one I want to start with is the unwillingness to stop an escalating fight. And a fight starts, a disagreement happens, and then we're all in to prove our point or to be right or to dismiss and shut down our partner. So we'll take it to whatever degree we need to. That over time is going to sacrifice the safety that we just talked about and basically break down not only yourself, but your partner and your relationship. Another one is not spending enough quality time together. Now, I know some of you are rolling your eyes like, geez, how much time does it take? For gosh sakes. There's a difference between quantity and quality. Quality means that it's you and me. We're undistracted. We're sharing. We're spending time together that's enjoyable. That's quality. Quantity is doing the dishes together, eating meals together with the family, cleaning the house, doing the yard work. Right? And there's a difference there. One, I get to share what's going on inside of myself emotionally, my thoughts, my feelings, my perspective. And the other is we're just hanging out and not sharing any of those things. There's an essence to quality time where when I'm done with spending quality time with my partner, I feel like they get me, that they understand me, that we've been able to share maybe a future hope and dream, or maybe clean up a mess, or just simply share where we're at emotionally and what we're struggling with, or what we're hopeful for, what we're celebrating together. And then there's this unique sense that you're with me in this, that we're together in this, that you get me, that you're my person. And it's that emotional quality that creates what we would call quality time. And we know from research and from practice and from working with couples that you can't obtain that unless there's some privacy, there's some intention, and there's some sharing emotionally that goes on. And again, going back to what creates connection in the first place, if it's not emotionally safe, I'm not going there. We will continue to talk about the weather. We'll continue to talk about the kids and the soccer practice and how we're going to and when we're going to repaint the house or take the family vacation. And that's never going to give you the emotional experience that you're looking for that quality time can deliver. And so I just want to create some distinctions there. Let's move to the next one, which is forgetting important dates or events. This is a little problem now, big problem later. Here's the thing about forgetting. We're all forgetful. We all make messes. But what we tend to do when we do make a mess as a human being, especially when we realize that it's important to my person, is I justify it or I dismiss it. I'll say things like, that's no big deal, right? Just move on. How important is that? What you don't realize in that small moment is that you've just dismissed your partner, and the things that are important to them, just because they're not important to you, doesn't take away the fact that it's important to them. And this is where we go back to some of those differences. Now, I get it. You're probably going to struggle and wrestle with remembering things that are not important to you. But if you continue to negate and dismiss your partner and the things that are important to them, they're not going to be around forever. You're dismissing the differences between the two of you, and you're playing that matchy-matchy game again, that if it's not important to me, then it's not important. So just get over and come to terms with it. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah, I think for me, the analogy is, and we may have talked about this, I know we talked about this in Better Love Club, was each one of these omissions, if you will, or these slights or these things, the little things that you missed and didn't act on, it's a little out of that emotional safety and permission that we talk about. And so by taking care of these small things that maybe don't seem so big for you, but they are for your special someone, puts a deposit into that. So you have to, just like from the financial accounting world, we want more deposits than we want withdrawals. And so if you can get your mind around it like that, like me, because I'm logical, you just have to make sure you're more on the deposit side of the ledger than you are on the withdrawal side of the ledger, because it's simple energy, if you will. To make sure you're more on the deposit side of the ledger than you are on the withdrawal side of the ledger, because it's simple energy, if you will.
For me, it reminds me of the analogy of death by 1,000 cuts,
Yes.
So a lot of times we think about our relationships as this like very like enigma, like it's an imaginary thing. But if you think about it as something physical, like a body, you can't continuously damage or injure something and have no consequences. If you continually have little scars or cuts on a person or your heart, let's say, because our hearts are emotional, eventually there's going to be pain that is unbearable. And so we think that we can continually hurt our partner or hurt our relationship. And then we're shocked when our partner says, hey, I'm in a lot of pain, or this relationship is beyond repair. But if you think about it in the physical, Mom, too, like you always bring things back to the physical because we can understand that better. It makes a lot of sense. You can't continually hurt something and expect there to be no repair.
Let me just ask, babe, on all of our clients and things that you work with, do you find more times than not, at least maybe with one of the partners, that he or she seems like it has this problem or this on the verge of divorce has come out of nowhere? And like you always say, once we really fully understand both sides of the story, the dots start to connect really easily. And yes, it has not been all of a sudden came out of nowhere.
And you know what? We're going to talk about that in part 2 when we move to the consequences of ignoring and justifying.
Brooke and I are always ahead of the script because we don't know what you're talking about.
That's okay. I love it because it kind of lets everybody know where we're going. Okay. But we're going to dive into that is typically the case, and there's a reason for that. But as we continue on with these examples of small problems, you're starting to see that, yes, forgetting important dates and events creates a disappointment in me. And yeah, I can take 1 or 2 or 10 or 50. But at some point in time, just as Brooke described, death by 1,000 cuts, emotionally, unfortunately, I, as a human being, am going to start to make up why it is that you don't remember. And what I'm going to probably conclude is that I'm not important enough for you to remember. Now, I get that may not be true for your partner, right? I get that they're probably reeling in their own internal stuff and have different things on their mind or different ways of looking at the world. Nonetheless, it does not negate the fact that your partner is dying by death of 1,000 cuts. And just because it doesn't make any sense to you doesn't mean it's not a real experience that your person is having. And eventually, if that goes unaddressed, it's going to create a problem. I like to say it like this. If your partner has a problem, so do you. Like it's a we thing, right? There's me and my stuff, and there's you and your stuff, and then there's our stuff. And our stuff is a byproduct of how I think and feel and how you think and feel. And then there's us, and it's going to come back around to get you. So if your person is struggling with something that you don't relate to or understand, then you'd probably behoove you to address it. Because if they have a problem, if you're a we, then you have a problem too. And it would behoove you to get to the bottom of that. And this brings us to the next one, which is that failure to communicate, misunderstandings, hurts, pains, really any kind of negative emotion, because we're not really equipped to talk about those kinds of things. In fact, we feel awkward or bad for even maybe feeling negative emotions. I want to just clear the air once and for all right here. I just need you to know that's normal. As human beings, we're going to have negative emotions, just like we're going to have uplifting, positive emotions and optimistic outlooks. We have the ability to do both, and we're going to do both. So if there's negativity brewing inside, then we're going to talk about some remedies for handling that. But just for right now, in this conversation that we're having in this moment today, no, it's normal. And it's really our awkwardness and our lack of knowing how and the uncertainty that we feel to bring some of these more difficult things to the table that often begins to sacrifice the emotional safety. So the communication is going to be a sideline byproduct of that. What communication? There won't be any, because everybody's retreating within inside of themselves in a hopes that this is just going to go better and somehow resolve itself. That's definitely a little problem now, big problem later. Not showing an interest in your partner and what they're experiencing, what's going on for them, essentially just trying to ignore it so that we don't have to talk about anything awkward or anything negative or create a fight. I need you to understand that if you're not fighting, it does not mean that your relationship is healthy. It means we're not talking 9 times out of 10. It means we're not sharing or talking about or working through the things that are naturally and normally coming up that work in our relationship and that don't work in our relationship. Any kind of nitpicking or criticizing or teaching and preaching or telling my partner how they feel and what they need and what they should do. Like those are things that you would think in the sweetheart aspects of your heart and just trying to help them and support them and cheer them on. You don't realize that you're actually criticizing them. You're actually teaching and preaching and making them feel small and unable and that they don't know the way. And nothing actually gives your partner more of what they need than if you would just let them do the talking and listen to them. We have a whole episode that I'm going to point to many times throughout this conversation that would really help you with that. And I guess I ought to just say it right now, right? That's episode number 123 about listening and sharing. And there's some real incredibly powerful do's and don'ts there, because oftentimes in our effort to help, we end up shutting the communication unknowingly down because we become or come off as critical or nitpicking our partner. And those little things will add up to very big things later. And I have two more here that I just think, I know this is a long list, but I think it's important for us to realize, okay, in this long list, think about how many little teeny tiny things day in and day out go on. Spending too much time on our phones and other devices. Why is that such a problem? Because you're distracted, because you're not listening, because you're not present, right? That takes away from the quality time that makes me feel like you hear me, you get me, you're listening to me, you remember me. And when that goes missing, then that's going to create a big problem down the road. And the last one is just disagreements on all of these little teeny tiny, seemingly ridiculous things that we tend to fight about and get into arguments about. What to watch, for example, or what to eat, or who should be wearing what, or how you should be saying such and such to so-and-so. These are little teeny tiny egregious things that we tend to get all wound up in that take us nowhere good.
All right, it's time to leave the Love Shack. But before we part ways, we want you to know our door is always open and we'll leave the porch light on, ready to welcome you back whenever you need a dose of relationship wisdom. For more resources and tools, visit us at loveshacklive.com.